8 years old, and we decided to embrace our love. Until this happened. It was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful. Two hearts finally daring to embrace the truth. At 18, the world felt like it was opening up, full of possibilities, full of dreams. We had spent years hiding behind the shadows of doubt, unsure of what others would think. But at that moment, we were ready. Ready to be ourselves, to love freely without fear. Our friendship had always been something deeper, something unspoken, until we both finally acknowledged what was always there. I never imagined that our decision to step into the light, to take a leap of faith together, would lead to a chain of events that would change everything. But what happened next shattered everything we thought we knew about love, about ourselves. Stick with me through this journey. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what comes next. I had always known there was something different about the way I felt toward him. It was a friendship that went beyond what could be called normal. From the first moments we spent together, I already knew that what I felt for him wasn't simple or easily explained. But for a long time, I convinced myself it was just a special friendship. It was a friendship without boundaries, without restrictions. When we were kids, our parents let us play together, without fear of what that could mean. We grew up side by side, sharing secrets and laughter, going through all the phases of life as if we were in a parallel universe. Yet, over the years, things began to change in a way I didn't notice at first. I had always been there for him, and he for me, but it was like there was always something pulling us apart, an invisible line we couldn't cross. Until one day, something in the air shifted. It happened on a simple conversation, one autumn afternoon. There were no grand plans, no promises on the horizon, just the two of us, sitting on the bench in the park where we used to go when we were younger. He looked at me in a way that I couldn't understand. His eyes were different, more intense. He leaned in closer, and for the first time, I felt the electric charge between us. It wasn't just friendship anymore. The space between us felt thinner than ever before. I could feel my heart racing as I caught his gaze, and for a second, it seemed like the world around us faded away. For a moment, I was frozen, unsure what to say. The words I wanted to say for so long stuck in my throat. Was this the moment? Was this the time I finally told him how I felt? Or was I simply reading too much into a look, a gesture, a fleeting moment? But then he spoke, his voice soft, almost hesitant. Do you ever think about what we could be? It was as if he had read my mind, voiced the thoughts that had been swirling in my head for as long as I could remember. A quiet confession in the air between us, one that neither of us had dared to say aloud before. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat growing louder, almost drowning out the sounds around us. I don't know what to do with this, I finally said, my voice barely more than a whisper. He smiled, the corners of his lips curling into something that was almost tender. Neither do I. And in that moment, everything changed. There was no going back. We were standing at the edge of something new, something unknown. The world seemed both bigger and smaller at the same time, as if everything had shifted, and we were the only two left standing in this space between friendship and something more. We spent the rest of that afternoon together, neither of us saying much more, but the silence between us spoke volumes. It was as if we had finally crossed that invisible line, stepping into new territory, not knowing where it would lead, but unable to turn back now. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the moment over and over again, the way he had looked at me, the way he had spoken those words. What did it all mean? Was this real? Could this really be happening? The next few days passed in a blur. Everything felt charged with electricity, with tension that we both tried to ignore but couldn't. I found myself second-guessing every interaction, every word, every glance. Was I just imagining things? Or was there really something more between us? It was hard to tell. The uncertainty was maddening, and every time I saw him, I felt a familiar pull toward him, closer, yet somehow further away. He seemed just as unsure as I was, his actions contradicting his words. But what was I supposed to do? How could I face him now that everything felt different? Then came the moment I knew I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether to take the plunge, to step into the unknown and risk everything, or to turn away and pretend nothing had changed. But could I really go back to how things were before? Could I ignore what was growing between us? I made my decision. "I can't pretend anymore," I said to him, the words tumbling out of my mouth before I had a chance to think them through. "I don't want to." He stared at me, his eyes wide in surprise. But then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It was a kind of smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Neither do I," he said quietly. And just like that, everything was different. The world we knew was gone, and we had stepped into a new one filled with possibility, filled with fear, filled with excitement. But it was ours, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly living. But as I soon realized, making this decision wasn't as simple as it seemed. The world wasn't ready for us to embrace this new chapter. There were things, people, waiting to stand in our way, to test us, to make us question everything we thought we knew. And that was only the beginning. It's strange how quickly everything can shift. One moment, everything feels perfectly fine, like you just go with the flow, and the next, you're drowning in a sea of confusion and uncertainty. That's how I felt the days following that moment in the park. We had crossed a line. We had admitted it to each other. But now, I had no idea where that admission would lead. The next few days were a whirlwind of strange, almost impossible feelings. It was like I was caught in a storm of excitement and doubt, a combination of wanting to move forward, but being terrified of what that could mean. There were moments when I would catch him looking at me differently, and my heart would skip a beat, only to be followed by the nagging voice in my head asking, "Is this really happening?" I didn't know what he felt, didn't know what this newfound closeness meant to him. I tried to act normal, to treat him the same way I always had. But it wasn't the same. There was a tension between us that I couldn't ignore, and I didn't know how to handle it. Every time we spoke, every time we laughed, it felt like something was hanging in the air, waiting to be said, but neither of us had the courage to say it. Our friendship, once so easy and effortless, now felt like a delicate thing, something I could break with just a wrong word or misplaced glance. It wasn't until the evening when everything came to a head. We were sitting on the porch of my house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden light over everything. It was a peaceful moment, but I could feel the tension tightening, pulling us both towards something neither of us were ready to face. I turned to him, watching as he absent-mindedly traced his finger along the railing, lost in thought. He seemed so distant, so far away, and I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to know. I needed to hear it from him, to understand if everything I was feeling was real, or if I had just built it up in my mind. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" He glanced at me, his eyes unreadable. "Sure, what's up?" There it was, the question that had been gnawing at me for days. I wanted to ask, "Do you feel the same way I do?" But the words wouldn't come out. Instead, I settled for something safer, something I knew would keep the conversation light, keep me from sounding too vulnerable. "Do you think we're okay? I mean, are we fine, or is this like a weird phase we're going through?" I immediately regretted saying it, but it was too late. I watched his face closely, looking for any hint of how he felt, but all I saw was uncertainty. He took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair as if he were trying to come up with the right answer. "I think we're fine," he said finally, though his voice lacked the confidence I had hoped for. "I think we're figuring it out." That's the moment I realized it wasn't just me who was uncertain. He didn't have the answers either. We were both in uncharted territory, fumbling around in the dark, trying to make sense of something that had always seemed so clear until now. We fell into a silence that was heavier than any conversation could ever be. I wanted to reach out to bridge the gap between us, but I didn't know how. What did I even want from him? Did I want him to confess what he felt? Did I want him to tell me that this was all worth the risk, that we could do this, that we could make it work? I wasn't sure, and that was the problem. It was then that he looked up at me, his eyes soft but intense, as if he was searching for the right words to say. And for a brief moment, I thought he was going to tell me what I wanted to hear. But instead, he said something that threw me completely off guard. "I think we should take a step back." Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My heart stopped for a moment, and I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't understand. Just days ago, we had decided to take the next step, to finally give in to what had been brewing between us for so long, and now he was asking to step back? What? I asked, my voice cracking slightly as I struggled to keep my composure. Why? What do you mean? He looked down at his hands, avoiding my gaze. I don't know, I think we need time to figure out what this is. It's moving too fast. Maybe we should slow down, think about what we really want. His words felt like a slap in the face, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I had heard him correctly. Was he saying that he didn't want this? That he wasn't ready? That what we had was nothing more than a fleeting moment, a temporary connection that would soon fade away? I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, I just sat there, staring at him, feeling a mix of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. I had put my heart on the line, had been brave enough to admit what I felt, and now it felt like it was all slipping away from me. I don't understand, I finally whispered. I thought we were on the same page. I thought this was something we both wanted. We are, he said, his voice quiet but firm. But I need time to figure out, okay? I don't want to rush into something I'm not ready for. His words hung in the air, leaving a cold, empty space between us. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but I knew it wouldn't help. I couldn't force him to feel the same way I did, and I couldn't make him ready before he was. I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure if I believed him. Okay, I said, my voice barely audible. I get it. I'll give you the space you need. And with that, the distance between us grew. It felt like everything I had worked for, everything I'd hoped for, was crumbling right in front of me. But in that moment, I knew I had no choice. I had to respect his decision, even if it hurt more than I could put into words. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Something had changed, something I couldn't ignore. I just didn't know what it was yet. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. It felt like I was walking in a fog, unsure where I was going or what I was even looking for. We had barely spoken after that conversation on the porch, and each interaction felt more strained than the last. Every time I saw him, there was a strange distance between us that I couldn't seem to close. We were both trying to act normal, but the air was thick with the unspoken words, the things we couldn't quite bring ourselves to say. I tried to reach out, tried to make things feel like they used to, but every time I did, it felt like I was pushing him further away. I spent hours thinking about what he had said, about how he needed space. I knew I couldn't force him to be ready, to be something he wasn't, but it was hard, so hard, because every time I looked at him, I saw the same person I had fallen for, the person I had always wanted to be with, and I couldn't understand why that wasn't enough. Our friendship had always been something pure, something special, and now it felt like I was losing it, losing him. I didn't know how to navigate the space between us, didn't know how to handle the fact that he wasn't sure anymore. But I couldn't just sit around and wait for him to figure it out either. There was a moment one evening, about a week after our conversation, when everything came to a head. We were at a party, a small gathering of friends from school. Everyone was laughing and having fun, but I could barely focus on any of it. My mind was elsewhere, constantly circling back to him, to what he was thinking, to what he was feeling. He was standing across the room, talking to a group of people, but I couldn't stop looking at him. There was something in the way he held himself, something in the way he laughed that made my chest ache. It was like a reminder of what we used to have, of how easy it had been before, and yet now, it felt like we were both pretending. I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to talk to him, had to get some kind of answer, some kind of closure. I told myself that whatever happened, I needed to know where we stood. I needed to hear it from him, even if it was something I didn't want to hear. I made my way across the room, my heart pounding in my chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I reached him, he looked up, his eyes locking with mine. There was a flicker of something there, something that made my breath catch, but it quickly disappeared behind the usual mask he wore around everyone else. "Hey," I said, my voice a little too loud over the music. Can we talk? He looked at me for a moment, his eyes searching mine as if trying to gauge my intentions. Then, without a word, he nodded and stepped away from the group, leading me to a quieter corner of the house. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice cautious, almost offensive. I could feel the distance between us already. It was as if there was an invisible wall I couldn't break through, no matter how hard I tried. I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to steady my nerves. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just feel like I don't know where we are anymore. I don't know what this is. I don't know what we are." His eyes softened a little, but he didn't say anything right away. He looked down at his hands, running his fingers through his hair as if trying to find the right words. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I don't know what I want. I'm confused. I'm not sure I'm ready for this." The words hit me harder than I expected. I felt a lump form in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I had hoped for something more, something different. But now I was faced with the reality that I had to accept. "I understand," I said, forcing the words out. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to go back to the way things were." He stepped closer to me, his eyes filled with regret. "I don't want to go back," he said softly. "But I need time. I need to figure this out." I nodded, even though it felt like a punch to the stomach. "Okay," I whispered, "take all the time you need." He reached out, almost hesitantly, and touched my arm, his fingers brushing against my skin. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a wave of warmth through me. It was the first time he had initiated any kind of contact since that night on the porch, and yet it felt like the distance between us had only grown. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice barely audible. "I never meant for it to get this complicated." "I know," I replied, my voice breaking slightly. "I know you didn't, but it doesn't make it any easier." We stood there in silence for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say. I wanted to reach out, to close the gap, to pull him back into place we had been before everything changed. But I knew I couldn't. Not now. Not when we were both standing at the edge of something neither of us understood. He looked at me one last time, his gaze lingering just a little too long before he turned away. "I'll figure it out," he said, moored himself into me. "I just need some space." I nodded again, even though I felt a knot tightening in my chest. As he walked away, I stood there, alone in the corner of the room, feeling more lost than ever. I wanted to scream, to ask why it had to be this way, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. It was out of my hands now. The party continued around me, the laughter and music filling the air, but all I could hear was a deafening silence that had settled in my chest. I didn't know where we were headed, or if we were even headed in the same direction anymore. All I knew was that I had just taken another step back, and I wasn't sure I could handle it. The days that followed felt like a blur. After our conversation at the party, everything between us seemed to freeze. The air between us became thick with uncertainty. Every glance I caught from him was laced with hesitation, and every time I tried to reach out, there was a pull, a hesitation in his step that made my heart ache. I tried to carry on with my life, bury myself in work, distractions, anything that could keep my mind from wandering back to him, back to the unanswered questions. But no matter what I did, it was impossible to ignore the space that had grown between us. It was like a dark cloud hanging over everything I did, making even the most mundane moments feel hollow. He was still there, always in the background of my thoughts, always present in the places we used to share together. We couldn't go back to how we were. That much was clear. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, something unspoken between us, something neither of us was ready to let go of. Then came the evening when everything changed. It was a Friday night, and I had planned to spend the evening alone, just a quiet night in with my thoughts. I had finally convinced myself to let it go, to stop thinking about him, to stop hoping for something that I didn't think would ever come to pass. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It started with a simple text message, one that made my heart skip a beat the moment I saw his name on the screen. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The last time we talked, it had been full of uncertainty, full of tension. But now There was something different about this message. There was an urgency to it, something I couldn't ignore. I took a deep breath and typed back, my fingers trembling slightly as I hit send. Yeah, where? A few minutes later, another message came through. I'll be at the usual place in 20 minutes. I knew exactly where that was. It was our spot, the small park bench near the lake, where we had spent countless afternoons talking about everything and nothing. It was where we had laughed, where we had shared our dreams, our fears, where everything felt simple and easy, before all the confusion, before all the doubt. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket, made sure I looked presentable, and walked out the door, my heart racing with every step I took. I didn't know what he wanted to talk about, but I had a sinking feeling it was about to change everything. When I arrived, I saw him sitting on the bench, his head down, his hands clasped together in his lap. He didn't look up when I approached, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. "Hey," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You want to talk?" He looked up at me then, and for the first time in days, I saw something in his eyes, something raw, something vulnerable. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but it hit me like a wave. It was fear. He was afraid. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think we need to talk about where we go from here." I nodded, sitting down beside him. My heart was beating so fast I could barely hear anything else. "Okay, so what's going on?" He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair as if he were trying to gather his thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot. About us. About everything." I waited for him to continue, but the silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. I could feel the weight of his words, the significance of what he was about to say, but I didn't want to rush him. I wanted him to say what he needed to say, even if it meant hearing something I didn't want to hear. "I've been scared," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of what this means. Scared of what we could be. I've been pushing you away because I didn't know how to handle this. Didn't know how to handle what I was feeling. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like I don't feel something for you." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. All the doubt, all the confusion, it all came crashing down on me in that one moment. I wanted to reach out, to take his hand, but I didn't. I needed to hear the rest of what he had to say. "I've been scared to admit it," he continued, his eyes meeting mine, full of sincerity. "Scared to admit that I want this. I want us, but I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready to take that leap. It's so much, and I don't know how to deal with it." I could feel my chest tightening as I absorbed his words. For so long, I had been holding on to the hope that this would work out, that he would feel the same way. But now, I realized that this wasn't just about me. It was about him, too. About him finding his own way, his own truth. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I do know that I can't keep pretending like nothing is happening between us. I can't keep pretending that I don't care." I swallowed hard, my own emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "I don't want to pretend either," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to keep holding back. But I don't know what we're doing or where we're going." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the ground for a moment. "I don't know either, but maybe we can figure out together." There was a moment of silence between us, the kind that speaks volumes. It wasn't the answer I had expected, but it was something. It was an acknowledgement of the feelings we both had, of the desire to move forward, even if we didn't have all the answers. "I don't have all the answers either," I admitted, my voice breaking slightly. "But I know I want to try. I want to try with you." He reached out then, his hand brushing against mine, a simple touch, but one that made my heart skip a beat. I looked at him, my eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt, but all I saw was the same vulnerability, the same fear, and beneath that, something else. Hope. "I think we can figure this out," he said softly, "but we have to take it one step at a time." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a resolution I had hoped for, but it was real. It was a first step toward understanding, toward figuring out what we both wanted, and that was enough for me. For now, it was enough. The days following that conversation felt like a dream, slow, uncertain, yet filled with small moments of clarity. It was almost as if the world had stopped spinning for a moment, giving us time to breathe, to really look at what we were about to do, what we were willing to risk. I had always known that love, true love, was never going to be easy. It wasn't going to be a fairy tale with perfect endings and easy resolutions. It was messy, it was painful, and it was full of mistakes. But the beauty of it, I realized, wasn't in perfection. It was in the rawness of it, the way two people could come together and create something real, something unbreakable, even in the face of doubt and fear. We had made our choice. We had taken that leap, even without knowing exactly where it would lead. But now, as I sat beside him once again, I realized that this was it. This was the moment where we could no longer stay on the edge of uncertainty. We had to decide if we were truly willing to dive in, to risk everything for what we both knew we wanted but were too afraid to say. It had been a week since that conversation on the park bench, a week since he had admitted his fears, and I had bared my soul in return. Since then, we had found a new rhythm, one that wasn't based on pretense or hesitation. There were still questions, still doubts, but there was also something stronger, an undeniable pull between us, something we couldn't ignore any longer. Tonight, everything was different. The quiet tension we had felt for so long had finally cracked, and in its place, there was a growing sense of possibility, of hope. We sat together in the same spot where everything had started, the bench by the lake. The evening air was cool, and the stars above twinkled in the sky like tiny sparks of light, guiding us. We were both silent, each lost in our own thoughts. I could feel the space between us, the gap that had been there for so long, slowly shrinking. It wasn't just physical distance. It was an emotional gap, the one that had kept us both from truly being open with each other. But now, in the quiet of the night, it felt like we had finally crossed that invisible line. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, his voice breaking the silence. "About us, about everything." I turned to look at him, my heart beating faster at the sound of his voice. There was something different about him tonight, something more certain, more resolved. I didn't say anything, just waited for him to continue. I think I'm ready," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with sincerity that sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm ready for whatever this is. Whatever we are, I'm not afraid anymore." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind raced, my emotions swirling. He was saying it. He was saying what I had wanted to hear, what I had longed for. But even as the words settled in my mind, I still felt the weight of everything we had been through. The doubts, the fears, the uncertainty. I couldn't help but smile. "I think I'm ready too," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I think I've always been ready. I just didn't know how to get here." He reached out, taking my hand in his. His touch was gentle, but there was a strength in it, a certainty that calmed my racing heart. "Then let's do this," he said softly. I nodded, squeezing his hand. In that moment, everything fell into place. All the confusion, all the hesitation, all the fears. It didn't matter anymore. We were finally here, finally on the same page, finally ready to step into this new chapter together. But as we sat there, hand in hand, a thought lingered in the back of my mind. Was this really it? Was this the beginning of something real? Or was it just another fleeting moment, another dream that would fade when the morning came? I didn't have the answer. But in that moment, I didn't need it. What mattered wasn't the future, wasn't the unknown ahead of us. What mattered was that we were here now, that we had made the choice to face whatever came next together. "We can't know everything," I said softly, breaking the silence. "But we know this. We know what we have right now, and that's enough." He looked at me, his expression soft, but filled with something powerful, something I couldn't quite put into words. "It's enough," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm not going anywhere." And with that, all the uncertainty, all the doubts melted away. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. We had crossed the line, and now there was no going back. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. The night was still, the stars still shining above us. And in that moment, it felt like the world had opened up, full of possibilities, full of love, full of us. Call to action, CTA. If you've been following this journey, you know how much we both struggled to get to this point. But now that we're here, I can't wait to share the next chapter of the story with you. Sometimes, the hardest steps are the ones that lead to something truly beautiful. Don't miss out, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to stay updated on what happens next. This is just the beginning.